31 of the most brilliant doctors in the country had stood around the hospital bed of billionaire tech CEO Alexander Reid, studying charts, scanning reports, whispering in clipped, clinical voices, and none of them could explain why a man who owned half the skyline was slowly fading away. His heart was strong, his blood was clean, his brain scans were perfect. And yet, every morning he woke up weaker than the day before, as if something invisible was draining the will from his bones. Before we step into this story of loss, hope, and unexpected healing, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across cities and countries in ways medicine sometimes cannot. Alexander Reid was not a man who believed in weakness. At 47, he was the face of innovation, the founder and CEO of Reid Global Systems, a company that turned struggling startups into billion-dollar empires. His sharp jawline and colder eyes had graced magazine covers. Employees described him as brilliant but distant. Investors described him as fearless. His ex-wife described him as absent. For years, Alexander had lived in glass towers and private jets, measuring time in quarterly profits and strategic acquisitions. His son, Ethan, had once tried to show him a school art project, but Alexander had been too busy finalizing a merger. Ethan had stopped trying after that. The marriage crumbled quietly. The divorce settlement was swift. Alexander told himself that sacrifices were necessary for greatness. Then, one morning during a board meeting, as he stood in front of a 30-foot digital screen presenting a revolutionary AI launch, his vision blurred. The room tilted. Words slipped from his mind like sand. He collapsed before he could finish his sentence. The first hospital admitted him as a VIP. The best cardiologists ran tests. The top neurologists scanned every inch of his brain. Endocrinologists checked hormones. Immunologists screened for rare diseases. 31 doctors, flown in from different states, reviewed his case over 2 grueling weeks. Their conclusion was unanimous and infuriatingly vague. Physically, he was fine. Yet he could not walk more than a few steps without trembling. He slept 12 hours and woke exhausted. His appetite vanished. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now seemed hollow. News outlets speculated everything from secret poisoning to a nervous breakdown. Social media buzzed with rumors. But inside the quiet, sterile hospital suite, Alexander felt something far more terrifying than illness: emptiness. He stared at the city skyline from his window and realized he felt nothing for it. On the other side of the city lived a man who had never seen the inside of a boardroom. Daniel Harper was a 34-year-old single father of triplets, Noah, Lily, and Grace. His wife, Emily, had died during childbirth, leaving him with 3 premature babies and a mountain of hospital debt. He had worked 2 jobs for years, cleaning offices at night and driving a school bus during the day. Daniel's apartment was small, the paint peeling in places, but it was alive with laughter. The triplets were 8 years old now, curious, loud, endlessly compassionate. They shared everything, from clothes to secrets to a deep love for their exhausted father. One rainy afternoon, Daniel received a letter from the hospital where Emily had died. The debt from 8 years ago had been sold to a collection agency. They were demanding immediate payment or threatening legal action. Daniel's hands shook as he read it. He had already been skipping meals so the kids could have fresh fruit. That same hospital was where Alexander Reid lay in his private suite. Fate, unpredictable and quiet, stitched their worlds together when Daniel took on an extra night shift cleaning administrative offices at that very hospital. He couldn't afford a babysitter that evening, and the neighbor who usually helped was out of town. With no other choice, he bundled the triplets in jackets and brought them along, telling them to sit quietly in the waiting area with coloring books. But children rarely sit still when curiosity tugs at them. While Daniel scrubbed floors down the hall, the triplets wandered, holding hands, their sneakers squeaking against polished floors. They stopped outside a partially open door guarded by a tired nurse scrolling through her phone. Inside, they saw a tall man sitting on the edge of a bed, staring blankly at the city lights. Alexander didn't notice them at first. He was lost in the silence inside his own head. The children whispered among themselves. They didn't know who he was. To them, he was just a sad man in a big room. Lily, the bravest of the 3, gently knocked and stepped inside before the nurse could stop her. Noah and Grace followed, clutching each other's sleeves. Alexander turned, irritation flickering across his face, until he saw 3 small faces staring at him with unfiltered concern. He expected fear or awe. Instead, he saw something he hadn't seen in years: innocent curiosity. They studied him the way doctors had, but without charts or machines. Then Noah asked a question that none of the 31 specialists had thought to ask. He looked at Alexander's empty hands, at the untouched fruit tray, at the massive room that echoed with loneliness, and he simply asked why he looked so sad if he had everything. The question hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Alexander opened his mouth to answer, but no rehearsed speech came out. No business jargon, no deflection, just silence. Grace tilted her head and asked if maybe his heart hurt, not the kind doctors can see, but the kind you feel when you miss someone. Lily stepped closer and asked if he had someone to tuck him in at night. The words pierced him more sharply than any diagnosis. For years, Alexander had measured health in numbers: blood pressure, cholesterol, market shares. But no one had measured the distance between him and his son. No one had tested for regret. Tears, unfamiliar and humiliating, welled in his eyes. He turned away, but the children had already seen. Daniel rushed in moments later, apologizing profusely, pulling his children back. He expected anger from a powerful stranger. Instead, Alexander surprised everyone by asking them to stay. Over the next hour, the triplets told him about their small apartment, about their mom in heaven, about how their dad made the best burnt pancakes in the world. They laughed freely. They argued over who loved their dad more. They spoke about missing their mother but still feeling her in bedtime stories. Alexander listened like a starving man being offered bread. When Daniel explained their situation, the debt, the exhaustion, the fear of losing their home, Alexander felt something shift inside him. A warmth he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, he asked his assistant to find out everything about Daniel Harper's hospital bill. Within 48 hours, the debt was erased anonymously. But Alexander didn't stop there. He created a foundation in Emily Harper's name to support single parents struggling with medical expenses. Yet the real miracle wasn't financial. Alexander asked his assistant to contact his ex-wife. He requested to see Ethan. The reunion was awkward, fragile. Ethan was taller now, guarded. But Alexander didn't bring gifts or promises. He brought honesty. He admitted he had been absent. He admitted he was afraid of failing as a father, so he chose work instead. For the first time, he listened. As weeks passed, Alexander's strength slowly returned. Not because of new medication, but because he began visiting Daniel's family on weekends. He sat on their worn-out couch. He learned to flip pancakes, burning them just as badly. He let the triplets braid his hair and paint his nails in ridiculous colors. Laughter filled spaces inside him that medicine never could. The 31 doctors were baffled by his recovery. They adjusted charts, marked improvements, but none could pinpoint the cure. The truth was simpler and more profound than any clinical explanation. Alexander Reid had been suffering from a life devoid of connection. And 3 children with sticky hands and fearless hearts had diagnosed him with loneliness. Years later, at a charity gala under glittering chandeliers, Alexander stood on stage, not as the untouchable CEO, but as a father and friend. Daniel and the triplets sat in the front row, dressed in borrowed formal clothes, beaming with pride. Alexander spoke about success, about emptiness, about how a single question can change a life. If this story has touched your heart in any way, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who might be silently struggling. And before this story ends, I have a special request for you. Comment the word connection if you believe that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. In the end, Alexander didn't just regain his health. He rebuilt his relationship with Ethan. He found purpose beyond profit. Daniel found stability and relief from crushing debt. The triplets grew up knowing that their simple compassion saved a man the world considered powerful. And somewhere in a quiet hospital room that once echoed with silence, a lesson remained. Sometimes 31 experts can search for answers in data and never find them, until a child dares to ask the one question that matters: are you loved?